Right. So again, welcome everyone to our webinar today on customer research. We're going to introduce ourselves here in a minute, but before that, here's the quick agenda for today. We're going to start with a topic which is probably not very uplifting, but we're not going to dwell a lot on there. We're just going to kind of set the scene, what's happening in the world and in the market, because that works as the context for why we're talking about customer research. And then we actually get into the topic of the day. We'll talk about why we need it, how you go about doing it. We'll give you some real life examples and take questions at the end. Right, a little bit about me. I'm Reeta. I work as a content marketing strategist and podcast host here at Advanced B2B. I've been working with B2B technology for about 10 years, both in in-house roles and also in agencies. At the end there, which looks a bit wonky there right now, are my social handles. So feel free to connect and contact. We can talk about marketing or my other weird hobbies. But I also have my colleague Veera here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Veera. I'm a growth marketing strategist, and I have marketing experience from around 7 years. My background is actually also in content marketing, and I've done in-house, agency, B2C, B2B, before B2B SaaS subscription stole my heart, and here I am. I'm also super passionate about user and customer experience, and that's something that probably shows when I talk about this subject as well. And if you ever want to talk about Scandal, hit me up. I'm here for all the goss.
Right. So if Advanced B2B is unfamiliar to you, some of you, this is just a quick recap or introduction. We are a growth marketing agency. We work with B2B technology companies, help them build strategic marketing growth engines. We're based in Helsinki, Finland, but we work pretty remotely, both in Finland and across Europe. Our customer base spans across Europe and North America. We are just over 40 professionals from over 10 nationalities, and we do pretty much anything related to marketing. Anything you can think of, we can probably sort that out. Right, some housekeeping issues still to do. We welcome any and all questions. We'll answer them collectively at the end of the webinar, but you don't have to wait until the end of the webinar to ask your question. You can just pop it into the question and answer box there, and then when we get to the end, we'll go through all of them. You can also send any questions or feedback later on after the webinar to us. If there are any issues with you can't hear or see or something like that, just say something to the chat box that we have there. We have our supervisor Emina here, and she will sort it out. You will get the presentation deck and also the recording afterwards, maybe today, but tomorrow the latest. And if you're using any social media posts about this webinar, we would appreciate the #GrowthAcademy. Right, but let's get to the topic of the day. So this webinar or generally our Growth Academy webinars that we've been running in the past few weeks and continue running in the next couple of weeks, these relate to efficient marketing. And we decided to do this theme now because, well, I probably don't have to tell anybody here what it has been like in the market in the past few years and what it still continues to be. But we're seeing, slashing budgets because of that. So this is essentially what has happened. So if you were with us 3 weeks ago in our content webinar, you've probably seen this image. So apologies for the slight overlap, but I did want to include this image here because I think it really well kind of captures the what has been happening, and it's the kind of the volatility that we've seen in the market. And it's a pretty extraordinary set of circumstances. Like we've had regulatory issues even before pandemic, and then we hit pandemic, and then we hit war, and then, economic crisis and rising oil prices and supply chain issues. And, the list just goes on and on and on. And especially, well, this image is from Boston Consulting Group, and they seem to think that we are kind of in the worst of it at the moment, and hopefully and volatility will improve after that. But it's no wonder that there's uncertainty in the market, and it's no wonder that companies want to do things more efficiently. Companies as a whole, but also, marketing as well. And one of the things that companies have done in the name of efficiency is to slash those budgets. It's understandable you need to save costs, but there comes a point where cost cutting doesn't cut it anymore in a way. So you also have to kind of protect the top line as well, right? So here's a few things that you can do to protect that top line. So this is kind of a three-way playbook or approach of what you can do. So first of all, you have to sense what's happening. You do that by harnessing as much data as you can from your customers and how their needs are changing or buying behavior is changing. And you also have to sense what's happening in the market. So again, here, customer interviews, customer research that we're talking about today is a really good way to stay on top of the customer's needs and what's happening. So just ask them regularly how they're doing, but not only how they're doing, but also try to kind of go deeper into what's happening behind the curtain, so to speak. You also have to play defense, right? So you have to defend the top line so that you're resilient across your functions. This one thing that this means is taking super good care of your customers so that you prevent churn. But on top of that, you also have to kind of figure out who are your potentially churning customers now, show them the care as well, and then focus on your sales to them. And you do this by doing those customer interviews all the time. And then you also have to play offense in this situation as well. You can't just stay kind of behind the lines in a say. So you have to seize any opportunities you possibly can and you possibly see and investigate those. So for example, this current situation, as long as it continues to be like that, it might mean that you have to find new ways to tell your story or define your positioning or identify new markets or target audiences. And the only way you do that is if you know your customers well enough and you ask them. You can initiate a voice of customer program as well, which will give you those insights as well. Right. So there are other things you can do in all these categories, but I've only wanted to focus on the things that specifically relate to customer research here. And this actually brings us to Veera, who's going to tell us more about why exactly do we need customer research.
Yes, I think it boils down to focus quite a lot. So we as marketers, we acknowledge that there are a million things that we could do, and especially that we would want to do. There are so many possibilities. And I feel like that is also one of our most common pitfalls. So we try to serve every single business area and segment at the same time and be perfect with them. But what actually happens is that we end up splitting our limited resources, so our hours, our money, and either we don't get results or we get them so slow that we don't even see what works and what does not. So we end up spending a lot of money on things we can't then prove if they work or not. And I feel like customer research is a really amazing way for us to find the right focus and then use the resources that we have in the smartest possible way. And I'll try to explain it a little bit better through these couple examples. So in marketing, we are kind of used to focusing a lot on quantity. So trying to acquire a lot of new customers. And there we kind of when we put our focus on acquiring a lot of different kind of customers, we forget that not all customers are equal. So some customers are better asked for than the others. And we shouldn't just try to get any customer with 100 euros and a pulse. So in a subscription business, it means that some customers, they do churn a little bit faster than the others, and the others stick around longer. Or maybe in transactional business, some customers buy again and again, and the others just don't. And when we focus on acquiring more and more new customers, we tend to ignore the churn that happens, which is the silent killer of our business. So we know that whenever a customer leaves, we need to replace them to keep growing. And if a lot of customers are leaving, we need to do a lot of extra work to replace them. And this is something that we can see that we are maybe ignoring a little bit too much even is that when we talk with different businesses and I ask like, what is your churn rate? Quite often the answer is either, I don't know, or it's something like, well, it's only 5%. It's not big enough to be worried about. And then I think of this chart, which is a really good example of this. So, for example, here in this example, we are looking at a business that is getting 50 new customers each month, and they are bringing 250 euros of monthly recurring revenue. And in this example, if we would say that, oh, the monthly churn is only 5%, we start to see the issue. So it's the orange line over there. It means that we are growing super slowly. In 7%, we have almost stopped growing. And it's because in subscription, churn is compounding. So you are not just losing revenue for 1 month, but you are losing all future revenue as well. And to grow sustainably, it's super important for us to acknowledge which are the customers who stick around the longest and who we should acquire more so that we don't have to continuously keep providing more and more new customers to grow. And here is also a good example what we mean by the not all customers are equal speech. So typically when we start thinking of the best customers we should acquire more, our minds instantly jump into the biggest wins. And I think it's quite natural, since whenever we get a big sales, we can like celebrate it and are happy about it. We just look at the data that is currently available for us. But when we are looking at just the size of the deal and the customer acquisition cost, we actually end up looking at the wrong data. So for example, here, if we would be looking at just that data, we would think that the first customer, the one above, would be the best one for us and the one that we should acquire more of. But then when we bring in the full data set, we can see that there are so many other things that affect how profitable and good a customer is for us. So here, the first one that we are looking at, we can see that, yes, they probably bought the biggest package that we are offering, but and they continued buying it for a little bit longer. But soon they realized that, okay, this product might not serve my needs just as well as I thought it would be. It doesn't fit perfectly as I thought. So they actually dropped to the smaller package. They are not seeing the value in the biggest package. And they decreased the amount that they are spending. But then also they noticed that they have some difficulties with the product. So when it doesn't suit their needs the perfect way, they ended up contacting customer service multiple times, asking for help, asking for modifications to the features. And that meant that product team also had to get involved and do those adjustments, because it was a big customer. We didn't want to lose them. So what happened was that the customer retention cost also went quite high in this case. And in the end, the customers still churned. They didn't feel like the product filled their needs as it should, and they ended up choosing another solution. But then when we look at the second customer who didn't buy the biggest package, they bought a little bit smaller at first, but for them, the product suited their needs just as they had thought. They didn't need help in using it. They didn't need help from customer service. They thought the features served them just perfectly, and they were happily using the product on their own. And then at some point, they realized that the product is so good that we want more, and they actually bought the bigger package and continued buying with it. So when we started looking at the lifetime value instead of just the direct ROI, we could see that actually the second customer was better for us, and these type of customers we should want more of. And that is exactly what we mean when we talk about ideal customers or ICPs. It means the best customers we would need and want more of, because they bring bigger value than the others, because they intuitively understand the benefits and see the value. They are easy to sell to. They don't ask for a lower price. They don't churn easily, and they are profitable from all perspectives. And they also often recommend the product or service to their peers because they love it. So in our perspective, the best thing you can do is to first recognize that some of your customers are just simply better than others. And then the next step is to recognize that what type of characteristics make them better than the others, so that you know what type of customers you should focus your marketing efforts on, so you don't have to constantly bring new customers in.
So you don't have to love all your customers equally. That's what we're saying.
Yes. But then the question is, like, how do we do it? Like, when we recognize that some customers are better than others, how do we then recognize them from the mass of customers? How can we say that which potential customer is better than the other? And that is about building yourself an ideal customer profile, recognizing what are the characteristics of your best customers. And unfortunately, I think there might be some templates available online that you can look for, but I haven't found any of those too useful for myself, because I don't think there's a checklist you can use while you are building your ICP, because it's all about like what is relevant to your business, and there are unlimited options, so to say. What I do recommend is avoid sticking to only the firmographics. So quite often we start thinking about like the size of the company or employee count or industries or location or something like that. But those quite often are not the most relevant things, but they can be something like the tech stack the customers are using, or it can be like company culture that is very valid and makes the customer better for us than the others, or it can be changes in the company or the environment around them. So there are a lot of different things. These are for inspiration, but please don't use this as a checklist. And I wanted to share an example what the ICP process often ends up looking like. I know there are multiple different ways to approach this, but after building quite many ICPs, I feel like this is how it often goes. So the place we often tend to start from is the hygiene level, and it's not on purpose usually, because the hygiene level, I mean the characteristics that all of our good fit customers should have. So not just the best fit customers, but all customers all in all. And that's just the place our brains tend to go into. So I think it's good to say this out loud. I wouldn't include this into the final documentation, but it's good to get this out of our system so then we can go to the best fit customers. But I feel like these are quite often firmographic heavy because they are hygiene things that you need to have in place. So for example, company needs to have at least 10 employees in order for them to be a suitable customer for us at all, or they need to be located in a certain place because we only have certain language versions, or we only have teams in these countries or something like that. But after that, we get to the ICP level, which is the characteristics that the best fit customers have. So what are the characteristics that separate your best fit customers from the rest? And here we often can dig a little bit deeper. So here we can go into those most important characteristics. Here we can start talking about, for example, tech stack. So for example, in some cases, if a customer is using HubSpot, they might be a better customer than the rest of them. Or if they don't yet have a dedicated person hired to role X, they might be better suitable for our product. And in this case, I think this is something that we could even use as a checklist and aim to use it as a checklist. So whenever we are looking at a potential customer, we could go through this list and be like, yes, do this check out, and is this an ICP or not? But then there's the third level, which is what I call ICP possibilities, which often gets thrown in there kind of like as a side product. So those are the characteristics that you feel like might be relevant, but you're not 100% sure. It might be because we don't have enough data to confirm it, or it can happen when we start defining ICP and get to a very specific level. So we have a long list of characteristics, and then we realize that there is no such company that will fit all of them. So in that case, it's important to recognize that this might not be realistic, but these might be relevant for us. And these I would maybe leave to the ICP documentation and revisit when I revisit the ICP and think, is this really valid? Should this be part of our ICP, or should we drop this out?
And actually, thanks for going through that list. And then Veera just said a really important thing there at the end, or you say all kinds of important things, but at the end, especially, you know, when you revisit your ICP. So I just want to point out here that ICP is not something that is, you know, set in stone. You make it once and then you make a stone tablet of it, and this is my ICP and we're going to stick to it. It's a living document, right? So you can edit it and when you get more data and so forth, but it also might have to change when you're going to a new market, for example. So the same characteristics might not be relevant, or at least some, or not all of them might be relevant in there. I have a customer, international customer at the moment who's coming to Finnish market. They have defined ICP in their other European markets. And now we're doing customer research, and I already can see that their characteristics are not going to be relevant, or some of them are not going to be relevant in Finland.
Yeah, exactly.
Just wanted to point that out there.
Good addition.
Right. So when we are talking about customer research, we are talking about researching those ICPs. So there's no point in researching everybody, especially the customers who are costing you a lot of money, right? So we want to make sure that we get the data from, you know, the most profitable, the best fit customers to us, because those are the ones that we want to get more of. And that's what customer research is designed to do. And here's just these two, you know, statistics here. They always puzzle me, because this is a research that Profitwell did some years ago. This is the latest that I could find, and I have no reason to believe that things have changed very drastically since then, so I'm including it here. So companies who did invest in customer research, they grew faster, sometimes 2 to 3 times faster than the companies who didn't. But at the same time, we have, you know, approximately 65% of marketers have never done any kind of customer research whatsoever. And these two things just don't compute in my mind, right? And here's another reason, or another example of what happens if you are not doing customer research. So this is also from the same Profitwell study. This image or graph, sorry, shows what the 5,000 features that product developers have done, the most recent 5,000. And so these represent the features that the company is expecting that customers want to buy and expecting that they will be selling in the future. Now, but what happens when these same companies, when it was asked what customers are wanting to buy? This is the image. So there's a big mismatch between what companies think they're going to be selling and what companies, what customers actually think that they are buying. And I'm going to argue that if more customer research had been done in these companies, there wouldn't be that big of a mismatch there. So before we go into the actual how you go about doing this phase, I wanted to highlight 5 specific benefits of doing customer research. There are plenty more. I have a ton, but we have limited time. So these are, I think, the 5 biggest ones that I wish most people would keep it at the back of their minds. So the first one actually relates to the graphs that you just saw. So if you do customer research, you get the insights from your customers that will help you with your product development. So you make smarter product improvements. If there are any product managers or product developers here, you also know that you can't cater to every single need that your customers have. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. But if you have good enough understanding from a good customer base, and there are certain kind of demands and trends, then you will be able to make those improvements better. Also, one of the biggest reasons that, one of the reasons that customers might be churning is that the product itself is not really fulfilling their needs. So if you do customer research, you get to know those needs better, you get to know those pain points better and motivations better, and then you can address those in your product and in your service, which will help you reduce churn. Okay, but when you're so churn is one thing, but then you also, churn and increasing customers is kind of like the 2 things of the same coin. So you want to reduce churn, but you also want to increase your sales and revenue. Sorry, I forgot water. So when you have those insights from your real customers, and their needs, and how they talk about your product, and what the value is that they get from them, that means that you can also use that data and that insight to talk to your potential customers, your prospects, in the same way and convey the same value that your current customers are already getting. And so that potentially increases your sales and revenue, or you manage to convince more people to buy. So getting new customers is one thing, but increasing revenue is not, how should I put this? Somebody will argue against me. So increasing revenue alone isn't always a good thing. So if you end up spending more to get those customers, your profitability then goes down, right? So customer research allows you to kind of look at the customer journey more efficiently and making it more efficient when you know what happens there better. And that means that you'll be able to close more sales and keep customers around longer without spending more money on marketing and or customer acquisition strategies. And then finally, customer research helps you to create a more targeted marketing strategy. What this means is that when you know the pain points of your customers, what motivates them, what makes them buy, what are the triggers there, then you are in better position to make the right messages to the right target groups and the right tone and the right content, the right ads, all this kind of stuff. So So customer research allows you to create a more targeted marketing strategy. So essentially these 5 things here, what they amount to is that you are able to level up your customer acquisition, retention, and monetization game. And this doesn't depend on business model, right? Any business model works, any industry works. At least that's what I'm going to argue until somebody proves me wrong, right? Okay, so hopefully we've now convinced you of the need for customer research. If you were skeptical before you came here, Veera is going to now walk us through what does this actually mean in practice.
Yeah, it's funny that we often say that there are no silver bullets in marketing, but if there would be something close to it, I think it would be customer research, just looking at the list of those benefits. So it's a little bit different than what we usually preach.
That's true. Maybe we need to start talking about it as a silver bullet.
Oh, yes. But yeah, there are a lot of different tips and tricks we could share about like how to go about researching customers. But here we are going to walk through just the basics. If you have any more questions about this, we can answer the questions, obviously. But here is what the process looks like. If we think about the full customer research, not just the interviewing the customers, but the full process. So the first step and very important step is to define your goals and focus areas. So understand what are your most important target markets and segments where the growth is coming from. As I said, we as marketers tend to try to serve all of them at once, but since we have limited resources and budgets, it's important that we recognize where should we focus first. And also because what Reeta mentioned earlier, that the ICP can vary between different markets, or if you have like multiple products or segments, the ICP can be a little bit different. So I feel like the easiest place to start is by choosing a very strict focus. And then when you broaden the focus or you change the focus, you can then validate whether the ICP is the same or if it's different. If it's like different, and you should do the work again. But yes, start with the focus areas, your goals. What are you trying to achieve with marketing? Then you can start running the ICP workshop with your most important stakeholders, usually sales, customer success, business, marketing. I'm going to go through on the next slide then a little bit more about this. Then you interview around 5 customers. I know there are a lot of different opinions, like is 5 customer interviews enough? I feel like based on my experience, it is very much enough, because it's not, the purpose is not to create quantitative data that will give you all the answers like written in stone, but it's about creating very well data-based hypotheses. So really, really good hypotheses that you can then start experimenting with your marketing. And those are like based on the data that you gather from customer research. Then you analyze the findings, build your marketing strategy based on them, and start validating the findings, continue customer interviews, and continue reassessing the ICP. And if we look at the kind of like how to ICP process, so the first and most important step is to dig into data. So usually your CRM data is your best source for this, because if you try to do this just based on your gut feeling, most likely you are going very, very wrong. So I recommend going to your CRM and start looking for your happiest customers, your most profitable customers. And then also the other side of it, your unhappiest customers, the ones who haven't been profitable at all, and listing those out. And then with your sales, marketing, customer success, business, together you should start listing the characteristics that your best and worst customers have. So it's the process of going through the data and looking what you can learn from it. As said, think outside of firmographics. Test final definition on real customers. Then when you have the final version of the ICP. So quite often when we start doing the first version of the ICP, I like to call it hypothesis because we are doing it for the first time. We might not be able to take everything into account. So quite often we tend to go either too vague or too specific. So when you run real customers through it, you can see if there are any issues that don't work, and maybe there are some like ICP possibilities you want to take into account, but not put on your final ICP. And also, like as Reeta mentioned, we really recommend doing this often. So not just leave it be for years ahead, but you need to recognize that the world changes, the market changes, your product, customers, competitors change, so does the ICP. And then you should revisit it at least once per year, seeing if it's still valid, if there's anything that you should change on it. And quite often when we start building the ICP, the characteristics get more specific over time also. So that's why it's also a good exercise. And about the interviewing, this is also a skill that takes quite a lot of practice, but here are a couple good ways to do it. So after you have listed your ICP characteristics, you know what your ICP looks like, then you pick and choose the customers that fit the ICP, you interview them via phone. Around 45-60 minutes is usually the best ones, because then you have enough time to really dig deep into why they are doing certain things, what are their pain points, and so on. We are using this job to be done framework, which is really good one, can recommend. And then when you start gathering the insights, you need to start looking for patterns, anything that repeats, anything that you find interesting, and then start drawing conclusions and creating action points based on the insights that you get. This is very shortly what it looks like. If you have any questions later, we are happy to answer.
Yeah, I guess I can, one thing I could add here, if you're the sole marketer in your company, obviously this is a lot of work for one person. My condolences for that. But if you have more people, then I recommend, 2-3 people do these interviews, because then when you start putting the data together, you can also discuss it. Have you found this? And, what are your thoughts on this? And so forth. So, another pair of brains and eyes always help, but you can do it alone as well. Just it is a lot of work for one person alone.
That is a really good point. And also, like, one good practice is to go through the findings with the stakeholders, so the sales, business, customer success, and discuss the findings together, because that's usually super valuable as well. Absolutely.
Right. What to ask? There's a lot of text on this slide. I'm not going to go through all of them. You'll get the deck and you can come back to this if you want. But so there are, I just wanted to kind of highlight the things that we ask. There are, our way of doing this isn't necessarily the Bible for customer research. We've had good results with it, so we're sharing our process, but there might be other things you also want to ask from your customers. So the way we divide our customer research, we kind of put them into 5 categories. So whoever we are interviewing, we want to understand their background and context, what their priorities are in work, and, what their responsibilities are and any challenges they have there. We also want to understand the use and impact of the product. So if we're interviewing our client's client, so we are trying to understand how our client's client is using the product of our client. This is a complicated way of saying it, but the good, the bad, the ugly, the impact, whatever they can tell us about the use of that product. We also want to understand what happened before. What was the company using before they switched over this specific product? Then we want to, I think we have the most questions about the buying process, because that's, obviously very important, but we dig very deep into that because we want to understand what happens in that buying process, because that is going to inform all of our marketing and sales as well. And then we also want to understand kind of the information seeking habits. So we ask, where do they get their information from? What channels do they use? What kind of content they consume, and so forth. So there is this kind of a big picture that we are trying to create. And then the link at the bottom of the slide, That goes to our interview question template. So all the questions that we usually use, you can just go and download that to themselves. Just one more thing to add here. So this applies to if you already have customers who are using your product. But if you are in the early stages, you're just trying to validate your product, or if you're going to a new market, you might not have customers in those markets. So then you need to kind of edit some of these questions. You might not be able to use the use and impact questions and so forth. So you might have to speak in hypotheticals or come up with something else. Right, we have plenty of time, right? So I'm going to we are going to give you a few examples of what has happened with our clients that we've done customer research with. So first of all is Toggle Plan, which is a project planning tool or work management tool. Both work. So before we started working together, Toggle had positioned themselves as a project management tool. And if you know anything about that category, it's pretty competitive. So there are companies like Asana in that category. But then we did the customer research for them, and we found out that Toggle's clients or customers didn't think about Toggle as a project management tool. They didn't even talk about it as a project management tool. What they did use is a project planning tool. And if you don't think there's a big difference, there is, trust me, and you will see it in the results. So based on the customer research, or based on this finding, we redefined their ICP, we redefined their messaging. So we started talking about project planning tool and those terms around it, and we all adjusted their positioning based on that. So what happened? Before this change, so with the old positioning, Toggle was getting about 400 ICP trial starts per month. And then after the change, after we started talking about the tool differently, we went to almost 1,000 ICP trial starts per month, which is about 250% increase. And the year-on-year revenue increased by 40%. So what this example shows is that customer research allowed us to make a shift in their positioning and message and marketing that put them in front of the right audience with the right message and with the right terminology. And then that led to, pretty tremendous increase in acquiring the right fit customers. Here's another example, Vapaus, which is a benefit bike service for employees. Here, the customer research allowed us to understand the customer base a bit better, or actually wider. So before we started working together, or even at the beginning of our cooperation, the target audience for Vapaus was this kind of passionate, hardcore cyclists who loved biking. They ride all year around. They have the means and willingness to, put money into their bike and, buy all kinds of expensive gear around it, right? So when we did the customer research, when we started working together, we actually found out that this kind of target group is a pretty small portion of the market. And we found out that there is actually a wider, completely untapped potential in the market. And that untapped potential was actually, everyday cyclists who they do enjoy biking, but they don't, need to be these spandex wearing triathlons to put a lot of money in the gear and bike and whatnot. They do appreciate a good bike and they would, put that money in it. But, there's a big difference, and there's a difference in terms of the size of the target audience. So we made that change. And then, adjusted marketing and messages and who we talk to and how we talk to people. So we didn't get rid of the earlier target audience. We added this as an additional target audience for their marketing. And one thing that really kind of warms my heart is when our customer said that the way we wrote down the potential in the market and the new target audience was so well written out that their CEO actually put it to their new business strategy as it was written out in the marketing strategy. And Veera.
I also wanted to include one anonymous example because this is a really good one about kind of how very practical level we can get with also customer research, but in a very important level as well. So in this one, we showcase like how you can find the best tactics and channels to use your resources on. So in this case, this company X had an existing hypothesis that they could increase the sales by sending a monthly newsletter that shares discounts for different products. And it was a very valid hypothesis, in my opinion, but we did customer research and then we found out that it might not be true after all. So we found out two very important things. First of them was that email was not actually the best channel for this target audience at all. So customers directly told us that they don't use email or they don't like it. So they prefer other communication channels and they rarely read their emails. And when I asked, have you received this newsletter? They said no. And even if I could see from HubSpot that they had, but they just hadn't opened it. But they had completely, it had slipped past their mind because they didn't pay any attention to the emails that they were receiving. So that already gave us a really good indication that maybe email is not the best approach for this target audience. But then the other finding, which was actually even more important one, was that the buying process did not support this hypothesis. So customers actually told us that when they buy, they do research, they carefully choose the right product for them, and then they continue buying that same product for a long time. So whenever a need arises, they always order the same product. So even if there would be the best discount in the world, if it's not for the exact product that they have already chosen and decided on, they won't buy it. So the likability of them getting the offer on the right product at the right time when they have the need is quite low with email. So that's why we recommended that we should use our resources on different things than this newsletter.
Great. Right. We are getting to the end of our presentation. We're going to open things up to questions here in a minute, but we wanted to go over some kind of common objections that we hear when we suggest companies do customer research. So, Veera, I'm sure you've heard this. Our sales is already talking to customers. There's no need for us to do customer research. What would you say to that?
Yeah, this is actually something that we hear quite often. And I do agree that from sales, you do get quite a lot of valuable insights and information. So you shouldn't disregard it, but you should keep in mind that it's very different type of information that you get from customer research because the context is very different. So if you think of a salesperson doing their job, they are going to have a certain goal in mind. They want to close the sales. So when they are asking their questions, they are asking them from a different angle than we would in a research setting. And we quite often, if we start asking sales questions, they can tell us what customers are doing, but they don't know why the customers are doing it. So they cannot answer any in-depth questions that we have. And also good to remember that not only sales have a different agenda in mind, but the customers also have a different agenda in mind during the sales call. So they have their own reasons to guide the conversation to a certain direction, and they might want to keep some things on their own and not share quite everything and not tell their reasoning to everything. So in a research setting, it's quite clear for both participants that this is all about gathering information. We are not trying to sell anything. You are not going to buy anything, but the questions and the answers are going to be quite different. So for example, if a salesperson asks in a sales meeting, how are you comparing different options? And then we ask it in a research setting, the answers are gonna sound quite different. I can guarantee that. And on top of that, if we only talk to sales, we only get information from that one part of customer journey, from the beginning of it. So then we miss out on the valuable insights that we would get on the actual usage of the product, like what is the value the product provides for the customer. So that's also one thing to take into account.
And also to add to that, we've actually had, or at least I've had situations where we've been working with a company and their salespeople have said, yeah, these and these and these are, very satisfied customers, and we know them, inside and out, and you can do customer interviews with them. And then when I've gone and do the interviews, it has turned out that they're not at all as happy as sales thought that they were. And there's no way we could have used that data. And then when we went back to the salespeople, they were absolutely shocked about the results. So it speaks to what Veera was just saying. Salespeople have a slightly different agenda to customer research.
Yeah, that happens surprisingly often. And that also comes to using data when you are building your ICP and choosing customers to interview. So if you have an NPS score, please do use it. But then maybe you could answer us this common question, that when we say that we would like to do 5 interviews, or we have done the 5 interviews, and then someone asks that, are you sure 5 interviews is enough? Are we getting enough data from that?
Well, Veera already alluded to this earlier in this presentation, but just to recap. So we've done customer research with less than 5 interviews. We've done customer research with more than 5 interviews. And we've actually found that 5 is pretty good number of interviews. Now, remember, we are not doing scientific quantitative data research here. We're not trying to get to the absolute truth. What we're trying to do is to gather enough data to create good enough understanding of what our customers are thinking, and then use that data and those insights to create hypotheses that we can then go out and experiment with and test if it's accurate and does it work and so forth. So it's not, you don't have to interview every single, ICP customer that you have. 5 is enough. When we talk about testing and experimenting, that's one way you can look at customer research. It is a good way to collect data to then form kind of data-based hypotheses for marketing and sales. At the end of the day, you don't have to stop at 5, right? You can obviously do more than that. You can start with 5, and then, for example, you can make the decision that, okay, we'll interview a handful of customers every year from now on, or you can just make it part of your process and then add to that, initial customer research that you do. And I know Veera, for example, does this. You have, I think, a Slack notification that after a customer has been working with us for a certain amount of time, then you get a notification saying it might be a good idea to do customer interviews. Is that right?
Yeah, it works as long as you don't ignore the notifications.
Okay. So, okay, next one. We really don't want to bother our customers. We shouldn't ask them these kinds of things. What would you respond to that?
Yeah, I kind of get where they are coming from, but also with the same type of thinking and logic, it would also mean that when we ask for feedback or when we collect NPS, we would also be bothering our customers. So if we think of our customers, especially our best customers who are actively using our service or product, they most likely also gain from developing the service or the product that they are using. So they mostly likely have some thoughts on what they would need more of, what is the value that they are getting, and they are happy to share it. So I feel like at least 70-80% of customers that I have talked with have been quite happy to share the thoughts that they have already had. And sometimes we even get feedback like, I've been trying to tell this already to the person I'm in contact with, but I feel like they haven't been listening to me. So I'm super happy that someone is listening to me. So I feel like this is also customer service and something that you provide for your customers, someone who is listening to them and asking them what they think, and then takes the feedback forward and takes it under development. This makes customers feel heard, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then maybe we could go through the last one, which is that Henry Ford would not have built a car had he listened to customers. Then we would all be still riding horses.
Yeah, if this made you laugh, I'm glad, but we actually do get this comment every once in a while. Okay, there is actually evidence that Ford's dismissal of customer feedback created a blind spot for them. So as long as the Model T was ahead of competition, it competed on price, as long as the market remained static, great, it was all fine and dandy, but then competitor General Motors came along. They introduced some new innovations in the 20s. They started making new designs. They started giving new financing options to their customers based on customer feedback. So they were fitting those to suit their needs. And that's when Ford's market share actually started slipping. Although Ford was category leader in cars at that point, but actually competitors find it pretty easy to start taking market share away from them by addressing customer needs and designing for those needs. GM was listening to customers, Ford was not. And do you think that Ford is still developing cars by not listening to customers? I don't think so. Okay, granted, you don't necessarily want to, take your customer feedback at a face value. What is important is to understand the why behind those demands. And then you take your own technology and you try to solve for that why. You try to compare the customer why and your technology and find the sweet spot there in a way. And then obviously in marketing, we can't just talk about things that are untrue. So we have to try to talk about the value, the why that customers are already getting now, right? Okay, so those are our objections. I think we have time to start taking questions. Any questions already there? Or if not, you can just send those in.
Yes, any kind of questions, also the dumb ones. I love the ones that might feel dumb, but then in the end are not so.
There are no dumb questions.
Yeah, I agree.
There are never dumb questions. Yes. Except when I ask them, I always feel like my questions are dumb.
I know. It's so horrible to try to break that threshold of feeling dumb. But maybe while we wait for the questions, we can go through the next points as well and then check at the end if there are any. Yeah.
Like we said, feel free to put in those questions there. We're just going to show these couple of housekeeping issues here at the end, so we'll come back to those questions. So for example, next thing we're going to have in our webinar series, this Growth Academy webinar series, is a webinar on data dashboard for business success. So we're going to be talking about how to build data dashboards that actually help marketing and business and improve your return on investment. And our colleagues Hanna and me are going to be talking about that. That webinar will be held in Finnish. That was a lie. Finnish. And that's already happening next week. And you will get a sign-up link to that when we send you the materials. And also, did I have something else here? Yeah, and then our final webinar for this series is marketing battle, brand versus lead generation. This is a conversation I see all the time happening, especially in LinkedIn, where you should be putting your money in this kind of economic situation. Is it brand or is it lead gen? So there, our colleagues Hanna and Sari are going to be talking about that in a couple of weeks, actually. So if those are things that you're interested in, you will get a sign up link to that. Well, I can just leave this here. I can keep thanking you if in case you want we answer any questions. But I guess no questions have come in. we can wait, or then we can just wrap things up here. And if you come up with any questions later on, afterwards, obviously feel free to send them to me or to Veera. You can use LinkedIn, you can use email, whichever you prefer, and we'll answer those then. Okay.
And
well,
mail to our office.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're always welcome to visit us. Yeah, that's perfectly fine as well. Okay, well, I don't see any questions, so I don't want to keep you online unless I know everybody's busy nowadays. So I'll just let you go about with your day. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have a good day. Oh, did we have